Yeah, I think we should get started. It's about 4:01. Um,
Right.
welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining Razorpay, and we are excited to show you what can happen when you actually try and combine payroll, compliance automation, payments, and all of that together, and how it could help businesses. So Razorpay already serves lakhs of businesses from a payment perspective. So today we are excited to talk about payroll and why it is important. It kind of gets swept under the rug because it's a non-value added activity, and a lot of businesses spend time doing this. So the idea is to give all of you some sense into what compliance is, how to get it right in India, as well as hear from two incredible founders who've not only built HR products but have successfully built businesses and have had to do this themselves. So we have with us Samarth Mason, who is from Dockable, which is also building quite a transformative product in the HR space. Basically trying to help businesses align their objectives as an org and get their employees working towards a common goal. So welcome, Sam. We're excited to have you and hear from you on your early business startup days. I think from the second and third you had Opfin, and you by then you knew what to do. But yeah, we would love to hear on how this was early in your days. Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Rohit. Thanks for the introduction as well. Yes, I think Often has actually been a very interesting find and a product that I think has benefited me personally and our startup in a very big way. So we got onto it as the one of the initial few customers, but as you know, anyone would be aware when you're starting a business, as I say in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, getting paid is actually at the lowest, and
Yeah,
you have to make sure that you get this process right and up and running right from day zero, because you're trying to hire talent and you want to make sure that you have the basic hygiene in place. So we kind of started with an Excel file, a spreadsheet, the good old spreadsheet, where I used to initially just keep a tab of 5, 6 employees who we started with. It was a pain to structure their salaries because some of these guys came in from corporate backgrounds, and
yeah,
for those who worked in startups, it's they are usually a lot more accepting of any changes to
yeah.
or any small or big change that might happen. But the guys who are coming from corporate jobs, they expect very structured approach to payroll. So yeah,
Absolutely.
salary structuring turned out to be a big problem. We had to have a
Hmm.
CA on board from day one as a startup. Keeping a CA on board from day one also is an expense, but we had to do that just to make sure that the structuring is happening on time. And then I think the month end execution was also painful, where you're kind of sitting and
Yeah.
transferring salaries. And initially, we got the maker checker thing going later, but initially,
Hmm.
it's usually the founders who are controlling the purse strings and sitting and making one transfer after the other at the end of the month. It's really
Yeah.
painful.
I
So
think
yeah,
uh, I
yeah.
think I also want to just interrupt you quickly and ask Anuj, who actually started building Opfin. And I think prior to that, just for the audience, Anuj is a technology person. I would just say, just leave it as technology person because he just likes building products. And he built his first product, got into YC. He was actually the first founder who got into YC from India, and which was later acquired by Hike. And not sure how much payroll trouble he saw there. But yes, after that, he did decide to solve that with Opfin, which later was acquired by Razorpay. So Anuj will kind of give us his sense and idea of what he saw was broken in India and why he decided to build Opfin later in the conversation. So Anuj, thank you for joining us, and yeah, looking forward to hear your thoughts on early building and early startups and how you do that.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, a minor correction. I wasn't the first person from India in YC. I was the first solo founder from India in
Got it.
YC. There has been one more after me. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um, if do you want me to talk about how the idea of Opfin came about?
No, I think first I wanted to cover basically what is wrong with the current system. Today,
Sure.
payroll is a process in India, for example, is, I would say, broken. As I said in the beginning, it is a non-value added activity, but as Sam rightly pointed out, it is an essential activity because
Sure.
employees expect that they get paid on time. So I just want to touch upon 3 or 4 key points here. The first one is, I think, what arises from human error, Sam, right? I mean, you said you were working with the CA, and I'm guessing you also had someone, were you doing this yourself, or did you have someone who's compiling this data for you? Did you face challenges from a human error perspective?
We did actually. For the first month, my tech lead, was completely confused about his salary for the first 2 months actually, because we just couldn't get the structure right, and what was communicated to what was executed on the Excel file to finally what was paid. There were minor, differences in
Yeah,
all of that. So human error is definitely a big problem. And unless you have an experienced CA team working with you who've done payroll or managed payrolls for for some time, it's a big problem. And if you have a standard structure for everyone, then I guess it's still better. But
yeah,
if you're trying to offer, very contextualized structures or giving flexibility to employees to structure their comp, oh my God, then it's a big mess. It's just
absolutely.
not worth the times that
So
you have.
I think I can talk a little bit about the human error because I was that human early in my career. I was in HR and I was asked to do payroll every month, obviously, at startups as an HR, and there would be horror stories, right? We would have employees who would walk up to me and ask me, "Hey, I did not get my salary. What happened?"
Yeah.
And it turns out that there is one Excel format or one column that in the exchanges with the CA firm, obviously we had outsourced it as well. And during that, there are some errors and employees don't get paid. So human error is something that I have personally been a part of and played a role in that. So yeah, also human error from a compliance standpoint, right? I remember having to deal with, for example, different compliances. I think from your perspective, when you're very starting out early, you would not have to deal with, say, an ESI or PF. But how about TDS? How was TDS handled? Did you have to explain to your employees what TDS is or why that deduction is there in their payslip?
I think they understood the deductions for sure because TDS deduction is a very it happens in every organization and people understand it. What they have questions around is tax brackets and how can I save my tax and what can I declare in terms of investments and how does it all add up in the end. And especially some of the young employees we hired, like a couple of freshers straight out of college, they had no clue.
Yeah.
So yes, regarding compliances, it is it's important to get people to kind of understand the compliances, especially the guys who are new to your company.
Yeah.
But from a process point of view, I think it was painful because I remember I used to have these dates marked on my calendar, TDS to be deposited.
Yeah.
And every month I'm like keeping a track of that, okay, now my TDS needs to go out and I need to make that submission. And then I'm following up with my CA. I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, have you done this? Have you made the submission? So it's just not worth your time to kind of get into these.
Absolutely.
I actually have an interesting story over there. So, as we said in the beginning, Samarth was one of the first few customers of Opfin. And while I was validating the idea for Opfin, I remember walking into Samarth's office one day, and he was actually paying his TDS that day. And I had actually not seen the process for paying TDS till then. And I saw Samarth doing it, and I was looking at what he was doing, and I asked him, how much of a problem is this? How often do you do this? And how much of a value would a software add to it if it did it on your behalf? And I remember Sam saying, just if you can just take care of this in itself is such a big pain point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Anuj, that leads me to the last point here on data security, right? I think what we're saying here is that there are so many different people and different systems and tools. So how and when you're exchanging data with different people, how important is to manage all of this in one place? And from a data security perspective, since you build products, could you just share the kind of information that is stored and how loosely that gets moved around today?
Yeah, sure. So we are all familiar with how the traditional payroll process works, right? It's almost always on Excel sheets.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of Excel sheets that you can download from the internet,
Yeah.
which will let you plug in your employee salaries, and they will kind of tell you what the compliance payments are.
Yeah.
So there's multiple problems in that approach. There is the accuracy part of it. There's the security part of it, and then there's the part where there are just too many players involved in its execution.
Yeah.
And from a security perspective, I think the fact remains that payroll data is data that most companies like to keep private.
Yeah.
Most employees wouldn't be comfortable with sharing their payroll data with unknown people.
Yeah.
And all of these problems can be fixed very easily and in a much better manner through automated software
Yeah.
rather than doing it in Excel sheets.
Yeah.
And yeah, so basically, I would say it's not just the problem of security; it's also accuracy. There are errors in putting inputs.
Yeah.
In an Excel sheet, it's very easy to put in an extra zero. We've actually seen that happen with clients
Yeah.
where they've literally forgotten to put a zero or they've put an extra
Don't
zero
mind
somewhere.
the extra zero, to be honest. It's the one that gets missed out.
Yeah.
But Sam, again, Anuj spoke about employees and how they would not like their data probably to be shared outside.
Yeah.
Talking about employee flexibility, did you have issues around that? Employees wanting to have data on a single system, for example, pay slips on a single system.
Yeah.
So did you have to kind of set up a tool to manage that?
It was a pain. It was a big pain, not just payslips. Yeah, simple stuff like a full and final settlement.
Yeah.
A guy is leaving, and and you know how it is. Like, people usually live from paycheck to paycheck, especially when you're just starting your career.
Yeah.
And then you send an email to your CA to kind of process the full and final, and there's this black hole which gets created, and then for the next 15 days, a full and final calculation is going on. So it's a simple thing, and it should just happen automatically with a click of a button. And here we have the CA calculating the full and final and coming. It's a big pain for the employee, and they want that flexibility that the moment they're out, they should know their full and final amount. They should know when it's being credited to their account and done. So that's
Yeah.
one. People want pay slips. People are applying for loans. People are applying for credit cards. Again, you don't want to send emails and then ask for a pay slip, and then there's an error and it's not formatted and it just looks unprofessional. So
Yeah.
you should be just able to download a payslip like instantly from a software, and so they just have access to it. These are like hygiene, right? This should be a no-brainer for them to do. So yeah, I would say full and final calculations, the ability to access payslips, flexibility there, reimbursements. I
Yeah.
think that is a big area again, and especially in a startup, you generally tell people that, dude, just swipe your card and just bill it to the company. I mean, you don't really have major processes around it.
Yeah.
And then you're keeping a separate Excel file. You're keeping a tab on whose reimbursement is what. Then you have emails coming in from people. This is mine, and then you have to compile it. So if you just
Absolutely.
add all of this up, it's a lot of time spent on very non-value adding activities, which should just
Yeah.
be taken care of.
Agreed, absolutely. And I think as founders and running a small, like especially a startup, and when you're setting it up, time is probably the biggest resource that you have, and you would want to spend as much of it possible on something that moves the needle for your business than some of these other activities. So I agree. I think we're going to have a quick poll, and basically we want to understand how. Just a moment. We want to understand how you're currently managing payroll. Is it something based on Excel? Have you outsourced it to an agency? Do you also have an in-house payroll team? So just feel free to answer this question. And these are some of the common problems that we just discussed. Now, moving ahead, we just want to spend a little bit of time on compliance. I think Sam, we spoke about early employee TDS. When you're a small organization and employees have certain visibility or need certain visibility when it comes to TDS. But Anuj, coming back to you, when organizations scale up, you have certain other compliances that kick in. For example, let's talk about Provident Fund. I remember having to exchange information with my vendor in terms of who is a new employee that has joined this month, and give them details as to from date of birth to father's name to now I think it is Aadhaar card, but back then when I was in HR, we didn't have Aadhaar. But yeah, it was a physical form that we would kind of have to fill it up and give it to this vendor. He would go and he would, to be honest, again, payroll was the last thing I wanted to do as an HR, which is why I moved from doing HR to working on HR products. He would tell me that we have to create a new PF number for this person, and we have to do all of this. So just, I think a lot of it has changed. Now there is UAN, which makes the process a little simpler. So you could technically automate certain things, right? So tell us a little bit about PF, and also touch upon ESI, which is also something that goes under the rug, very applicable. A lot of employees don't get covered under that, or employers don't know about that. Let's start with PF,
Sure.
and the process around what has changed and why is it important.
Sure. So from a compliance perspective, companies in India basically have to take care of four things. There's TDS, PF, ESI, and professional tax, as this slide in front of you is telling you right now, right?
Yeah.
Different things kick in at different stages. TDS is applicable to everyone. There's no avoiding TDS. PF becomes applicable automatically to companies if they exceed 20 employees. You can also get it if you're below 20, but above 20, it's compulsory. ESI is compulsory above 10 employees in almost all states. And professional tax is completely state dependent. A state like Delhi has no professional tax, whereas some others like Karnataka, Maharashtra, they do have professional tax. To answer your specific question about PF is actually a very painful process for a lot of companies to properly take care of. There's two parts to it primarily. One is that you essentially have to maintain an employee register on the PF portal itself.
Correct.
The PF on the EPFO portal, you have to ensure that all your employee data is there. And as you were mentioning, some of that has been simplified now with the concept of UANs, which is basically a unique identifier for all employees in India. UAN has slightly simplified things, but even then it is a little painful because every time an employee joins your organization or exits it, you have to add or remove this employee from the PF portal. So this employee management is one part of it.
Yeah.
And then monthly, whenever you run payroll, you have to pay and file your PF returns.
Correct.
The execution of this is also a little complicated. There are several misconceptions around this as well.
Yeah.
So for example, just there's a concept of PF wages, where PF is actually calculated on certain allowances in your salary structure.
Yeah.
If you ask any like a layman how is PF calculated, there's a good chance they will tell you it's 12% of basic salary. But that's actually inaccurate. PF is now calculated as 12% of all fixed wages. There was a Supreme Court ruling on this a couple of years ago. So, just a simple mistake that we often see companies making when they're transitioning into our system. And similarly, there's complications behind ESI, PT, and TDS itself as well. Let me know how deep you want me to go into them.
Got it. I can just take you back to some of my experiences. I remember I was at this firm, and we were about 30 employees at that time, and we wanted to set up sales teams, remote sales teams, and in tier 2 cities in India. So I literally had to hire folks in, say, Jaipur, in Lucknow, and in Kolkata, and Chandigarh, and all of these places, and have 2-3 people, and depending on how much we could grow in that market, we would probably set up an office and so on. And suddenly I remember having to worry about professional taxes, right? For example, right? So a consultant told me that, hey, if you have employees in multiple states, and again, PT is driven by a state, so you might have to pay taxes in, so many others. Then suddenly I started trying to think, okay, can I actually look at a state where there's no PT and close that first? Because I don't want this headache right up, right? So I still remember that it was a painful process to even understand and get all of this together. So just a quick thought on PT itself and what that is. And I think even in, for example, Maharashtra, they have different calculations for it. So anything you want to add on the professional tax part?
Yeah, so the primary complication with PT is the fact that it's state dependent. Each state has its own laws around it. And some of it can just be downright silly. For example, just to give you a weird example, when you're filing professional tax returns for Maharashtra, and let's say you're paying professional tax for the month of June 2020, you actually have to go and select July 2020 when you file the PT returns. It's inane. And it's just one specific rule for just Maharashtra that you need to be aware of. Uh, and then again, depending on the state, there's a very good chance that the PT portal itself will not work.
Yeah.
Some of these PT portals, they look like they've been made by 15-year-old kids, to be honest. And they have the reliability of something made like that as well. So, and just to come to the actual thing that needs to be done for PT, typically it's about 2,500 rupees per annum, which is deducted from your employee's salary. It depends if they're not paid a high enough amount, the professional tax amount can be a bit lower. Again, that is state dependent. But yeah, it can be quite a headache. Most companies which operate in multiple geographies actually don't register themselves for PT in each one of these states. It's not enforced a lot, so the small companies do manage to get away with it. But yes, technically, as you were saying, let's say if you're a company in Bangalore, but you have employees in Bombay as well, then you should have PT registrations in both states so that you can pay PT in both states as well.
Got it. Sam, I think you lucked out there because Delhi does not have any PT where you were setting up, I guess.
Yeah, but we have folks in Bangalore now, and Bangalore has PT. So
Bangalore has PT, yes. But we also have Opfin, I guess, now, so that kind of helps you. But yeah, got it. I just want to go ahead and kind of talk about TDS just a little bit more because I think a lot of things have changed. I think government, largely, I always used to feel that why is payroll complicated? It's a list of employees. You have a CTC. You need to give them a salary. You need to pay the government some compliance, right? That's it. I mean, why do you complicate it? But I think the government wanted to complicate it even further. And when it comes to TDS, they have started a dual tax regime. Let's go to Sam first. Sam, any questions? I think you're already on Opfin. So did you have to answer any questions around this from your employees on this when this was launched?
not yet. No, we haven't actually.
Got it.
We work often, and life has been peaceful, so we haven't really had anyone coming in asking us questions on the dual tax and TDS as of now.
Got it. Anuj, do you want to just give a quick overview of what this change is? And I also want to quickly talk of the changes that came about with Atmanirbhar, right? I think there were some changes that came about there. So it also is important to keep updated on all of these compliances. So let's quickly talk about dual tax regime, what it means for employees, what changes for an employer, and has it become easy? Is there a 3-step process that you can share, which people can go back with?
Sure. So the dual tax regime, I think initially the thought behind it was a good thought, which was to simplify taxation in India. What the new tax regime does, if you pick it, is that it gets rid of all the exemptions and deductions, and it simplifies the calculation a fair bit. The tax slabs are lower, and you don't have to take care of the dozens, like literally dozens and dozens of exemptions and deductions which were available before. However, it kind of backfired overall, because then what the government did was that it made it optional. So now each employee has the option of either staying on the old regime or picking the new regime. And if you walk up to any employee and ask them which regime is better for you, there's a very good chance they won't have a straight answer, because you actually have to do the entire calculation to figure out which regime is better for you, right?
That's exactly what our guys have been doing. They've just been clicking on both the options and seeing what increases your in hand, and like, boom.
Right. So often we try to simplify the process, and we just gave like a straightforward comparison between the two regimes, and just made it very simple for them to select which regime they wanted to choose. But fact remains that it's become complicated. And then because of COVID-19 and because of Atmanirbhar and all of that, there are several other changes that also came about. I know we've only been talking about payroll, but there's also contractor payments, right? Which we take care of as well. So TDS was also affected for contractor payments. So it used to be very straightforward before, 10% for professional services, flat rate, you deducted, and that's it.
I think
but then TDS was reduced, and now it's like TDS went down by 25% for a few months. So, it's just the regulations keep adding up, and it becomes very tricky to stay up with these regulations if you are manually processing your payroll.
If I'm not wrong, even the PF was made option. I think they gave an option, right? Either you could go with a 10% calculation or a 12% calculation.
That's right. For 3 months of this year, you are allowed to reduce your PF contribution to 10%.
But just
instead
for
of
3 months.
Just for these 3 months, as far as we know right now.
Correct.
There is absolutely no knowing what might change.
Got it. I think true. I think earlier, from a payroll perspective as well, most CA firms or even HR folks, we would try and keep updated on the new latest tax slabs. I think that's what would change every budget at the most. But I think because of COVID, there have been a few more changes, and yeah, I think that has had. I mean, people have had to get themselves updated, be it a software, an Excel sheet, or however you do it, right? So the people have had to get updated. So that is interesting. Let's go ahead. I think we have another quick poll that we would want to ask all of you. And this question basically is trying to understand what you would want to see in a good payroll software. There are a lot of payroll softwares in the market, and we feel that there is a better way to do it. The idea of Razorpay doing payroll is simply that, right? Razorpay is in the space of payments, and payroll is about payments. Payroll is not about salary calculation or processing. Payroll is about payments of salary and making sure you're compliant. So we just want to understand what do you think you should look for in a good payroll software. And we will also have a quick demo of Opfin later and exactly what it does. But before we dive into that, I just want to go back to Sam and ask him. I think you were one of the first clients of Opfin and first users, and you've seen how that product has grown. I want to go back to Anuj and ask him why he built Opfin, but I just want to ask you first. When did he come to you with Opfin and said he's going to build this, or did he come with a product and said, "Hey, here's something I want you to use this"? How was that?
Yeah, so I think the way it happened was we were the testing ground or the guinea pigs of the first version of Opfin, and I'm not complaining at all. I think it was great because it took a lot of pain out from my regular pain points, which I was talking about. But I think Anuj kind of touched upon that. Whenever we were meeting, he used to constantly ask me questions about payroll and how we are executing, and what are the pain points. So I used to tell him that, yeah, the TDS takes a lot of time. It's just a very, brain dead exercise. I need to do this every month. And then there is this whole structuring, which has become a problem. Leave attendance is a big problem.
Yeah.
People are, people want flexi hours. People want to apply for leave. And I'm like, maintaining a leave tracker. I'm maintaining a salary tracker. I'm maintaining a reimbursement tracker. So yeah, we discussed these problems. And I think first few days of Opfin, it was, I think it was one problem at a time. So first we got our entire payroll onto it. The sweetest feature, I think, was the automatic structuring of salaries to give you the maximum benefit. I think that's what our employees also love the most. You don't really have to get into how much, HRA and this and that, just calculates everything automatically. It saves everyone time. I think that was really cool. So first we started with that. Then I think for me personally, the biggest, another big pain point was we use a lot of gig workers for a lot of our projects. And we would constantly had to make payments to them as well. So I think the contractor payment module was a very big relief, because then all the invoices are kind of coming in one place as they upload them, and our payments are going from here. I can look at my ledger and see and tally all the payments that have gone out in a month. It makes everyone's life very simple. So I think that was a module which I really liked, which came in, which was the contractor payments. And after that, I think Anuj ended up building stuff fairly quickly. So, before we knew it, we had the reimbursement module, we had the leave attendance module. I think recently we've had a couple of exits. So the full and final, the way it kind of, with a click of a button, settles everything very quickly. Small things which save a lot of time. So yeah, I mean, my favorite features have been definitely the adjunct payments and the leave and attendance, apart from the basic payroll, which obviously is
Got it. So he came to you. I think he kind of understood that there is a problem, but he came to you with a product which did, at least solve one of the primary pain points, and then it was built. So Anuj, let me take you back a couple of steps behind that, right? why did you think this is a problem that needed to be solved? When was that aha moment for you that, okay, I'm going to build a payroll software? Because I think you did not know much about payroll before that, as you just admitted. So what was that moment when you thought, okay, hey, I need to build a payroll software for India? And I think personally, what I love about Opfin, and again, as I said, I've been in HR, and I would have loved to use this when I was in HR, because it literally brings down payroll to a single click and a single number. And that's probably the most beautiful part about, a payroll system. So tell me, walk me through how you, because every software in the market kind of just processes. It gives you output files, right? It gives you a salary file, a TDS file, a PT file, and then you pick it up and go and do all of this, or give it to your C vendor. How did you figure out that this is the pain point that I need to solve, which none of the other payroll softwares were doing? And how did you arrive that this is what I will solve for? Just walk me through.
Sure. Yeah. So I have past startup experience. This Opfin is company number 5 for me. So we've run companies before, and we've processed payroll before, and it has been done either through chartered accountants or using the software that was available in the market at that point. And to be honest, I've never been very impressed with them, because they've always been the software that has been available. It always used to solve a part of the problem, but it never solved the entire payroll process for me. As I think is slightly touched upon, what almost all traditional software does today is that they act like glorified calculators. They calculate your entire payroll for you. But then the execution of the payroll, the payments that you have to actually make, the compliance management that you actually have to do, all of that is manual in nature. It still needs to be outsourced, either to chartered accountants or to in-house staff, right? The idea for Opfin originally came about when I was in the US for Y Combinator, actually. And I witnessed these two companies. One is named Zenefits.
Hang on. You were thinking of your next startup when you were at your startup with Y Combinator. Did I hear that correctly?
No, I wasn't actually thinking of my next startup, but I did witness what some startups were already doing over there, right? And so
I've learned a lot from you, but that would have been meta for me as well. So, yeah, go ahead, Anuj.
So there are these two companies. Some of you might have heard of them. One is called Zenefits, and the other is called Gusto. They are basically payroll companies operating in the US, and they've taken over the entire space completely. And how they managed to do this is by wrapping up all the complexity of running payroll. And the US has its own set of complexities. Every state has its own special laws for payroll. So it's a different market altogether. But how these companies managed to do it very smoothly is that they made this very simple interface which any business owner could use. The target audience was the founder. It wasn't a chartered accountant, or it wasn't the finance guy or HR. The target audience is the founder, who doesn't really know a lot about compliance, but can still use the platform and process payroll. And the platform takes care of all the compliance that is required around it. And I thought that was a very neat idea. So basically, after a few years, it wasn't then, after a few years, when that company, the one I was in Y Combinator with, that company got acquired by Hike Messenger. And then when I was leaving, I was trying to decide what to do next. That is when the idea of Opfin kind of really became something that I really wanted to do. Did some basic research in the market, found out that software still pretty much sucked. And then spoke with other founders and with people like Samarth about how their current processes were running, and realized that all of this is stuff that, in my opinion, and again I was looking at it from the lens of a founder, right, from a lens of a business owner, that this can be made so much better. And I think I also benefited from my lack of knowledge of HR and payroll processes, because I think if I knew about how payroll worked at that point of time, I would have maybe implemented a similar solution. But because I actually had no idea how the other solutions really weren't doing this compliance bit, I was like, okay, let me just try and automate everything. And that's where it started from.
Awesome. So I think, Samarth, you've already mentioned that now with Opfin, all of these have been incrementally solved for you with the new modules coming in. And I just also want to talk about, you mentioned that it is not, it was initially built for founders. But I feel that, a lot of HR folks, as well as finance, as well as anyone who is handling this as a function, right? They can get a lot of benefits from this. If you ask me as an employer or as an organization, probably are two questions that you need to avoid, right? An employee coming up to you and asking you, where is my salary? Right? Hey, I didn't get my salary. I would hate those questions.
Yeah.
They would come to me and just call me, and I would have to pretend that I'm in charge of payroll, right? Because I am in charge of payroll, I'm the HR guy, but I hand it off to the finance team who then does the bank transfer. And then I have to make this follow-up call to get back to my employee. And my only solution in the market is to create a HR help desk tool and put a tat for a payroll query saying, hey, I didn't get my salary. I have an HR process. As you said, Anuj, if you were building it with the processes that you would know that was in the market, you would have built a service desk tool saying, hey, here's where you can raise a query for payroll, right? If you've not got your salary, right? So I remember going through that. So that is one question which I think Opfin solves brilliantly, because we not only process, we execute, we actually transfer the salary to the employee. An employee fills in the bank account information. So that is very easily solved. And me as an HR, I could go and give him the UTR number, right? The second question I used to kind of always, it would kind of take me off because they would come and ask me, hey, why did I get only this much, right? What is this TDS? And again, we've outsourced stuff. Declarations are investment declarations are happening on Excel sheets. It is, someone is doing some calculations and a TDS value comes out, right? And we got to roll with it. And an employee would come back and some of them would ask, but I would say most of them don't even ask, especially if you're a fresher. When you don't know the ABC of what TDS is and investment declarations are, I think you just say, hey, I'll just, it's just what it is, right? And then you move on and you actually blame the company. In most cases, you blame the company saying, they'll give you a big CTC, but in hand me itna hi aata hai, right? So I think this is another part that Opfin really solves. Again, as you said, Sam, employees can see what their TDS is. So I just want to take 5 minutes and show a few screens of Opfin. Not too much, but just a couple of screens as to how we differ. Let me just share my screen. So we are a SaaS product, right? So we help anyone in the organization log in, right? From an employee to a contractor to a business owner to even the CA. The CA of your firm can log into your payroll tool and access reports. Why do you need to send them Excel files as reports? Give them a login, because again, we are not a typical SaaS platform who charge at a user level. The charges work differently. This is the primary dashboard. I've logged in as an administrator. I think the first thing that you would see is this account balance, right? So Opfin actually takes care of the entire execution process, and we give you one single number, which is your payroll bill for the month. And without getting into too much of this, I just want to show you what I consider are 3 steps to payroll. Three steps to payroll are very simple. Get a list of your employees ready, right? So under admin options, we have people, and you can manage a list of employees. We have an employee called Demo Webinar who has a CTC, who has a bank account information. He might have a PF registration, right? And we also have a bunch of contractors. So once you have your list of employees ready, you're ready to make payments to them. So you can go to run payroll. And again, here, a lot of different things. I think, Sam, I want your inputs on this. A lot of things get considered as inputs for payroll. And one of the things that people spend a lot of time reconciling is time and attendance data, right? Now, I agree that certain organizations which work in certain industries, say, let's say you're running a retail shop in a mall, or let's say manufacturing facility, I would understand that time is a super important measure, and a measure for your business operations, right? Then you have a lot of these services company who have, for example, timesheets, right? So I just want your inputs on how a payroll process, which is a non-value added process, gets mixed with business objectives, and people end up trying to measure time for payroll, whereas they should be measuring time versus performance and business, right?
Right.
So just a couple of thoughts on how you have seen this derail their business side of things as well, because I think that's something that your product currently solves, right? I
Right.
mean, from dockable perspective, yeah.
Yeah, I think from a payroll point of view, the expectation, at least with my team and the folks who I've been talking to lately, is the ability to manage the attendance of employees and leave of employees.
Yeah.
We aren't really looking at serious data there to see if the guys are productive or how many hours have they actually spent, not spent. I mean, that's not what we are doing. I think the pain point for us is, are we able to track the leave and attendance of our teams in a very seamless manner,
Yeah.
and rather than having trackers etc out there. As far as measuring time and productivity is concerned, I think the approach there, at least for us being a startup, is very different. There it's all about setting up clear objectives and KPIs for a month to 3 months. We don't look beyond 3 months at all.
Yeah.
And then just execute, do a fortnightly check-in to see how you're doing on each of these KPIs and metrics, and then give each other feedback or course correct if required. And that's really good enough, because as a startup you're just so busy all the time that rather than trying to create another process to manage productivity,
Yeah,
it,
exactly.
it becomes a little counterintuitive. You're just better off executing.
Yeah, I have seen companies trying to enforce, and I think this also goes back to why, again, it's such a funny thing, right? I've tried to sell different SaaS products over the last few years, and I've been trying to sell HR products, and I've been in HR, and what I feel is that amongst all SaaS categories of products, HR products probably have the lowest adoption. I mean, for example, probably the other end of that scale would be a finance product. For example, you take a Tally or a QuickBooks. The finance team is supremely diligent. They take care that every input in that is absolutely correct. But when it comes to an HR product, again, in between you have everyone, right? In between, now I'm a sales guy and I always worry that my sales team is not filling up their CRM on time, right? So you have all sorts of adoptions in between, but at the end always is HR. And the entire organization has to kind of use this. And again, one of the callouts here is what I wanted to talk about is how a lot of payroll inputs kind of get muddled. Technically, if you think about payroll and what could be an input for payroll, it's a monetary input. It has nothing to do with time, attendance. All of those would translate into some sort of a monetary value, right? And the idea is that you could have an employee, you have a list of employees, you have their CTC, you could give them certain inputs. It could be generally incentives, bonuses, or any of those sorts. And once you do that, you're ready to process and execute your payroll. And I told you that Opfin allows you to completely disregard the question of why is my salary this much? And that's because when demo webinar logs inside in his own Opfin account, he will be able to go and access tax deductions. And there, he will be able to completely view the dual tax regime that Sam and Anuj were talking about, and actually take a look at what his TDS liability is going to be if he chose the new tax regime versus the old one. Now, here's another exciting part that I really like Opfin for, and also as an employee, because I, as an employee, can take a look at my payslip, at my upcoming payslip. It's not even executed yet, right? And if you think about it, as an employee, I should have the liberty of even being able to guess my next paycheck. I mean, it's not supposed to be difficult, but today that visibility does not exist in a lot of organizations. And another great thing about Opfin is if your HR or whoever is handling payroll has already put in certain inputs for the month, you will be able to see it upfront as well, right? So you can literally have your payslip ready for you even before the payroll is done, and you won't have any surprises when you receive that bank SMS. Quickly, just adding some certain data here. For example, if this employee decided to declare certain HRA, again, Anuj, this is another, is there any options to automate this process? I think a lot of companies struggle with this, the entire employee declaration, the verification. Luckily, we automate it to an extent. We kind of give the option of verifying documents through Opfin, right? But
Right.
what is your take on this problem? I thought if they're just stuck with the new tax regime, we could have done away with this whole thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, one of the problems that we often see with traditional software actually is that, and I've seen this, in a bunch of companies where for some reason the tax deduction updates can only be done during certain windows,
Yeah,
right? The HR gets in touch with all the employees and tells them you can update your, let's say, investment declarations between the 10th and the 15th of this month, after which there will be no more updates allowed. And a bunch of people will miss seeing that email or will want to do it on the 20th and they can't do it. Opfin, on the other hand, kind of just maintains a lot of flexibility in this. By default, an employee can log in and they can update their tax deductions at any point.
yeah,
Uh, the administrators can lock it down if they want, but by default, our options are aimed for flexibility.
yeah,
And then, of course, the process around collection of receipts, of proofs of these investments, all of that can be a major headache as well. So we've kind of made that a completely online process as well.
yeah.
Employees can log in, update their proofs, and we actually confirm the validity of those proofs towards the end of the year. And the entire process is fully automated. HR or the business owner or whoever's managing Opfin doesn't even need to get involved in it.
Got it. And I'm guessing employees also get to kind of access Form 16s, and all of that is, the result of this process essentially, right? Which is also a big headache and gets delayed. They're waiting on their CA firm. So with Opfin,
Uh,
all of that is automated as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we take care of TDS filings as well.
Correct.
There are two TDS filings which are applicable for all employers, 24Q and 26Q. 24Q is TDS for salaried employees, 26Q is TDS for non-salaried employees. Often takes care of all the filings.
Got
And
it.
after your quarter four filing, the Form 16 is also generated by us.
Yeah.
And when it's made available on the platform, we actually even enable you to file your income tax returns with a single click.
Perfect. So coming back to my 3 steps to payroll, right? I really have boiled this down to 3 steps, I feel, which is a list of your employees, give them inputs, and then a traditional system would ask you to calculate and take a look at salary register. But one of the greatest thrills of executing payroll with Opfin is you don't have to look at a salary register, right? Imagine executing payroll without looking at a salary register. So all you need to do is every company would have a different date on which they process payroll and execute payments. So basis that date, you would just come to run payroll, make sure you're in the right month, click on finalize payroll, and we're able to reduce your payroll execution and activity to a single bill. uh, One of the ways I kind of talk about it is like when you pay your phone bill at the end of the month, you just pay one bill, right? Imagine if you had to go to 4 places and pay data, voice, SMS, and roaming separately. And you would also find out that for the roaming website, it opens only on Internet Explorer 8. Okay, so that is what happens when you have to go and pay ESI today, by the way, right? So this amount that you see here, the breakup of this is basically your employee's salary, the TDS that you have to pay as an employer, which is deducted by from the individual employees, the ESI contributions, as well as the professional tax, which dependent on where you are as an organization, you would have or not. And the idea is that you would have a current balance in Opfin, and you can simply request execution and everyone gets paid. You don't have to look at any reports, barring two actually. One is TDS, because you would need your acknowledgements because we take care of your filings. So you could literally come here on the 8th and access all the different challans. And as Anuj mentioned, we handle both 24Q as well as 26Q filing every quarter. That is taken care of. Similarly for PF monthly payments and filing. And we also have a very nice report called Ledger Report, which will call out every transaction. Another sweet feature which I like is reimbursement. Again, just to take a couple of minutes, and I've spent this on both sides, right? I've been in HR and I've always empathized with my sales folks, because they would come to me and say, "Hey, Sam, you touched upon this." They would say, "Hey, my reimbursements are pending, right? And it's not processed. I don't know. It got missed." And the finance team likes to make batches. They love their batches, right? They create the batches. They have 15-day batches, 20-day batches, quarterly batches, and so on. So, and I always used to empathize with employees, but luckily I didn't have to file too many reimbursements as an HR. But then I moved to sales after HR. Then I had to start doing reimbursements for myself because I was spending on behalf of my company. And it was a harrowing process. And with Opfin, again, the idea was to not build a bunch of configurations. We wanted to address the value of what a reimbursement is. And that is, if an employee is applied for a reimbursement, how do you get it back to him as quickly as possible? And because we integrate both an employee payroll, compliance, and payments system, you could have a 5-minute reimbursement process. You could literally have an employee apply for a reimbursement and it could be approved and paid within 5 minutes. So that's a quick demo of Opfin. We also obviously have contractor payments, but it's a SaaS platform, so you're welcome to sign up and experience our seamless onboarding flow as well. We have to kind of get into Q&A because I think people would have some questions. We already have some questions on chats that we want to kind of cover, as well as also we are floating a form that you could take a look at where we are asking you to provide certain information. And yeah, get ready for some goodies that you can kind of get back and take to your organization, right? It could be useful if you're not doing it on Opfin already, right? So yeah, Anuj, any thoughts on Opfin on the feature side? Anything that you want to highlight again that I missed?
No, I think we did a good enough job of showing all the primary features. I'd just like to call out the fact that we've mostly looked at things from the employer's perspective. One thing that Opfin also does very well is focus on employee self-service, so that employees need to reach out to HR or finance as little as possible. So that's something that we focus on as well. So what's in store next? I think there's one thing that I would like to talk about primarily. One of Opfin's primary market is the small and medium-sized business in India, right? And anything from 5 employees to 50 employees, these guys love using Opfin. One pain point that we often see with these organizations is finding medical insurance. Especially given the COVID-19 situation, it's become a big concern for a lot of employers as well. So what Opfin is going to launch very soon is that we are going to give all of our clients the ability to get covered under our group insurance, group medical insurance. So you will get the best benefits possible at one of the lowest rates possible, which you would actually never be able to get if you went out into the market yourself as a company looking to cover your employees. Opfin is using its volume as an advantage, and we're going to launch this feature very soon, group medical insurance for all our clients and their employees.
Got it. That's awesome. I think so. What you're saying is the idea is to continue building on the employer-employee facing stuff and not really get into the HRMS side of things, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
not something.
We don't aim to be a HRMS platform. What we plan to do is completely solve payroll and all ancillary related tasks around it as well as possible.
Awesome. Sam, quick question for you. Do you currently offer group medical insurance, or was it an easy process?
It's very interesting you asked me that, because just last week, my co-founder and I were having exactly this discussion that we should start offering it, to the entire lot. So we are hoping to, get that going very soon. And now that Anuj has disclosed the next feature, it makes it easier, I guess. But yes, we are now looking to do that for all the employees in the company. We're about 20 of us now, and we would be doing it.
Again, I think this could be very useful because the primary challenge that again I faced when I was in HR was data management, right? Here was one more vendor that I would have to give inputs to every month. Here's my new journey data, here's my rolling register, and here I would have to also capture dependent data, their pre-existing conditions, etc., depending on the policy. I mean, it was, sometimes I hoped that maybe we didn't have to offer this, right? It was a benefit that I pushed for as an HR. But then, yes, it did get quite tedious. So, yeah, I think that could be very, very useful for a lot of the businesses for sure. I think we have a few questions on chat as well, and if anyone else has questions, feel free to ask them. One of the questions that I have is, how do we map different salary structures? Again, very important. A lot of we provide a recommendation, obviously, of what is a good salary structure, but the system can accommodate different salary structures. You could have salary structures at an employee level, but again, I would be very careful as to what these structures are. In my experience, compliances are fairly well defined. So if you are paying someone below 21,000, you have to pay ESI. And if you're paying someone above certain amount, you have to have PF depending on employees. So the only salary structuring that is a useful structuring, in my view, is tax saving components. If you have food coupons, or if you provide if you provide, for example, communication allowances or travel allowances. Actually, earlier government had conveyance and medical, but that is also a standard deduction. But yeah, we do recommend structures, but we can also have custom structures. Can we do flat payment like contractors, but for interns? Absolutely, Suraj, we can. So Opfin can handle payments to all of these contractors, interns. They could also be vendors. As a business, every month you need to pay your landlord, right? You have office space for rent, so you might have to pay that. So you could just put that as a repeat payment, and every month your landlord gets paid, and Opfin will take care of the TDS for you. Right?
Yeah. Also, just wanted to, sorry to interrupt, Rohit, but if any attendees have questions, feel free to use the raise hand option in Zoom, and we can just enable you to ask the question directly on Zoom itself.
Yeah, we have few questions on the chat side. So let me just take a couple of them. Hi Rohit, I'm in HR. If I start using Opfin, should I include data from previous salaries also? I think that's also a great question. Absolutely correct. So implementing a payroll software or even an HR software becomes incrementally difficult as you progress in the financial year, purely because everything has to be calculated, at a month-wise. Compliance has to be paid month-wise. So when you start using Opfin, you would have to put in the previous taxable salary that has been paid to the employee and any TDS if you have deducted and paid. So, and that is easily handled as well. Is there any limitation to the employee size for using Opfin? So obviously we love automation, right? So we've tried to automate compliance payments. One of the best ways to use Opfin is to use my APIs. So you can literally automate your entire payroll and not even visit Opfin to an extent, right? So with APIs, you could handle a lot of scale. Compliance as a payment and payroll as a process, as we've just discovered, is not supposed to be difficult and painful. So we can automate irrespective of the employee size. Now, what could be interesting is there are certain pieces that come into picture depending on scale and certain processes which currently people follow. So those are what we will need to kind of address. But yes, can we execute payroll and pay compliances? Yes, absolutely. If you want to start using Opfin, how long will it take to get started? Anuj, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so there's two ways of getting started with Opfin. One is it's completely self-serve. You can actually go right now on opfin.com, sign up, and you can start adding your employees. You can actually get completely up and running without getting in touch with us at all. And I would say for like for a small organization with, let's say, 10 to 20 employees, the entire process it will take you maybe 10-20 minutes. On the other hand, if you're a bigger organization, do get in touch with us directly, and we will take your data from you, and we promise a 24-hour turnaround time, and we can get you completely up and running within one day.
Got it. We have another question here, which says, I earn 50,000 a month. Which tax regime should I consider?
That's a tough question. So at 50,000 a year, your annual salary is 6 lakh rupees. You're just making it into the taxable bracket. Below 5 lakhs, there is no tax. So assuming you are, if you're making any tax saving investments, you're probably better off with the older regime. But again, it's a tough question to answer. It will depend a lot on your exemptions and deductions.
Yes. I think there's another question here. Is this portal only for payment of TDS, or even the filing of TDS can be done here? Let me take that. The portal is end-to-end execution of payroll. So whatever you know as payroll processing software plus payroll outsourcing services, think of that delivered on SaaS. So it means salary payments, TDS payments, and filing, quarterly filing. And as I was showing on the demo, we will have your Q4 challans on the system. So everything is automated. Can statutory deductions be disabled at an employee level, even if they're enabled at the organization level on Opfin? Again, great question. Very much possible. One of the use cases we discussed, which was PT, right? You could have PT in one state and not in another state. Similarly, an employee could opt in or opt out of PF. So that is something that can be handled on Opfin as well. Yeah, I think I see a couple of questions around, can I upload employee information in one shot instead of manually keying in data? Absolutely possible. There's a simple Google Drive form that we can share, and you fill that up, and it takes us, as Anuj said, about 4 hours to get your account up and running. I have already chosen the new tag. This is an interesting one, Anuj. I think you went through certain iterations and had to change a product for this. Let me read out the question. I have already chosen the new tax scheme. Now I have second thoughts. Can I change back to the old scheme now?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we've gone back and forth on this a couple of times. When you originally launched the new tax regime feature, we give complete flexibility. You could switch between the two as many times as you wanted. Then we had to disable that feature because on a closer reading of the regulations, it turned out that switching between them wasn't allowed.
Yeah.
But then again, what happened was we were getting so many support requests for people who had made mistakes that we have now enabled it at an admin level. So an organization's administrator can reverse an employee's decision if they want to do so.
Got it. Suraj has a question. Is there any hidden charges other than ₹100 per employee, like payment gateway charges? I can understand why you would imagine that, because Razorpay is a payment gateway company, but this is a purely SaaS offering. So there are no other charges. There is no implementation cost. There is no one-time fees for filing. There is no one-time fees for tax document verification. I don't even charge you to generate Form 16s. Right? I only charge you at a monthly level, and not even based on users. Let's say you have 20 employees and you paid 15 employees. I'll charge you for 15 employees, right? I don't charge you based on logins. Again, those are categories of softwares where, because it is primarily only a user-based, user-driven kind of a software, they have to do it at a per user login. Whereas we actually want to complete the entire journey, and there are a lot of pieces. So yeah, it's purely based on payroll execution. How are the charges going to be? Interestingly enough, since all of you are part of the webinar, we will have a quick form that is sent out. So if you do sign up on that, we are giving away 3 months free of Opfin, as well as discounted pricing on our standard offering as well. So that's something that we are doing for all the participants today. Is TDS return filing chargeable, or it comes with the package? Everything is included in the package, including contractor payments. So PF, PT, ESI, TDS, payments, filing, Form 16, all of these are completely handled within the charge that we are talking about. We have, can we integrate with our existing software? Anuj, I think you should take this.
Yeah, so basically it depends actually. Unfortunately, the answer is it depends on what you're using. We are building out certain integrations. We are going live with QuickBooks quite soon. And we have other packages like Zoho Books and Tally also on our roadmap as well in the future. But I mean, the only disclaimer I'll say is we don't claim to work with any other external package. We have to build integrations with specific software.
Understood. Okay. How can I add voluntary provident fund deduction to my employees? Is that supported on Opfin?
Yeah, yes, we do support VPF, and In fact, the employee themselves can log into Opfin and change their BPF amount if they want to do so. And then again, Opfin will automatically take care of the deduction and the payment and the filing when the payroll is executed.
Perfect. Uh, then we have, uh, do we have restrictions in terms of adding the number of employees? Not really. Uh, I'm from a manufacturing firm where overtime forms an important part of the remuneration. Does Opfin provide a platform to upload the overtime details along with attendance details? This is a great question. As I said, I really appreciate the question because you are able to, kind of tell me that I need to convert this overtime to a payroll input. So I do give you a way to, I don't have a tool which will tell you, okay, this employee worked for 2 hours additional, so his payroll should increase by this much. But yes, the system is capable of collecting inputs from you. Once you have that value that you want to put into the system, the overtime payment, you could import that in bulk to your employees before executing payroll, and yes, that could be handled. Attendance and absenteeism needs to be updated. Yes. So basically, this would translate into loss of pay from a payroll perspective again. And you could add loss of pay as an input when executing payroll. And you could just say 3 days loss of pay, and that would translate into a monetary value. Okay. We have couple of questions also on chat here, which says charge per employee or an organization. As I said, it's a pure per employee per month charge. There are no other charges. There's no fees for setting up or implementation or anything like that. We have some frequently asked questions here. So let's take a quick run through this. Yeah, I think some of it was covered in the demo, where employees can get bonus components. Is switching a tough prospect? I think it's a good question. Again, as I said, selling an HR software in a new organization or implementing an HR software in an organization is always met with a lot of challenge. HRs, I mean, every employee has to use it in an organization. So unless there is a clear need, an organization would not want to do it. But there are a lot of obviously advantages with automating a payroll process. Instead of looking at this as an HR software, it should be looked at as automating your payroll and compliance payments. And once you approach it like that, you're basically looking at automating an activity. So yeah, there is initial setup time, I would say, about 5 days to set up. But after that, you could definitely have it automated. Any provision for ESOP to be included, an employee would be interested to do so as the amount is directly. Yeah, we have provisions for ESOP, which is basically, again, a component in your salary structuring. We can set it up. What would be, again, as we said, we are not looking at an HRMS system, but we would definitely look at having some sort of a platform where you can manage ESOPs itself. That's something that we would pick up later in our roadmap, and something that a lot of startups have already asked us. So again, great question there. Do we have biometric integration for attendance? Yeah, Anuj, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, so how leave-in attendance works in Opfin is in 3 primary ways. The first is completely web-driven, where your employees can update their attendance through opfin.com itself. The second is that we have an API. In case you have a tech team in-house that has the capability to work with external APIs, you can upload your attendance data automatically into Opfin. The third option is of a biometric device, where Opfin will ship a custom biometric device to you, and all you need to do is give it internet access through Wi-Fi. The biometric device will already have a list of your employees. It will automatically get updated whenever a new employee is added. And whenever an employee checks in or checks out, that data is automatically sent to Opfin through that device. There is the integration is completely pre-built. You don't have to do anything apart from giving it internet access.
Perfect. I have another question here which says, can you show us how to file TDS returns? So the best part is you don't have to file returns. We will file the returns for you. So all you need to do is, as I said, I'll go back to my paying your phone bill. So just get your employee list in order, give them the payroll inputs, take a look at your bill, pay that bill, and everything is taken care. PF, PT, ESI, your employee's salary. We can transfer salaries to any bank account in India 24/7. So yeah,
Yeah.
you don't have to do.
I would just answer this question slightly differently as well, where basically if you want to understand the TDS filing process, how it works is that Opfin is making the deduction of TDS from your employee directly. It pays the TDS as well. Rohit had shown some TDS challans in the demo. So Opfin will pay the TDS and upload these challans on Opfin. And then at the end of the quarter, Opfin will also file your return ourselves. You don't have to be involved in any step of this process. You can choose to do it yourself if you want. You can switch off 24Q and or 26Q filing from Opfin. But if you let us do it, then you basically don't need to be involved in it at all.
Perfect. All right, I think we've extended much more than what we had scheduled for. So we do have a few more questions. I think some of it were covered, some of it are interesting questions, but we will get in touch with all of you and we will answer those. And all those people who have already expressed interest in exploring and setting up Opfin, we will also get in touch with you. I think Harshita, we have certain documentation that is going out, right, in terms of how you could probably set up Opfin or how to move to an automated system. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So in the form as well, we have asked people to leave in, your email address and everything. And if you're interested in setting up the 3-month offer, as well as, a white paper that's going out, it's going to give you information about how you can set up Opfin. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about payroll processing and compliance and things like that. So yeah, we will try and make things a lot easier than it is. For sure.
Perfect. Also, Sam, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone involved in the audience, everyone, please do check out Dockable. I really like the approach they have for solving performance management. And again, OKR is something new that a lot of startups are following. So it could be a great tool to kind of handle how you manage performance. I think it's a very, very deep subject in itself, which we would love to hear from you, Sam, one of these days. But all the best with that. And I think you mentioned a new product, which is a Clink, right?
Yes.
Just a quick brief on what Clink is. I think it's something to do with remote teams and what we are going through now. So do you want to just give a quick brief on that?
Sure. It's a tool which enables continuous feedback for teams working remotely, and it integrates with any work tool you can imagine, from Slack to Gmail to Jira. So it gives you all the cues you need to enable continuous feedback for teams. That's really what it does.
Perfect. I think we have one attendee who wants to speak. So let me just allow them to speak, if that is okay. Victor, you should be able to speak now. Go ahead and ask your question.
You'll just have to unmute yourself first, Victor.
I had raised the question actually. So already it is in the Q&A this thing actually, chat window. So already I raised that question.
Okay,
So
got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Perfect. So
Okay, so I'll take that question. It says, what kind of security has been built into the system of Opfin? How do you ensure the data integrity of the system and how it works? So Victor, this is it's a technical question, I think, more than anything else. And I can give you, some answer to it. So first of all, we are part of Razorpay. Razorpay itself has to comply with a lot of security compliances. So, just that by itself, by law, we are required to do a lot of things which we are already adhering to. Some other things that you will see as a user of Opfin is that, first of all, the entire website runs on an encrypted HTTPS channel. You can't even access the website without encryption. All of our data and everything else is hosted on AWS in India itself. An AWS is as good as a platform as it gets for running and storing data. all of your data that is stored in Opfin, we can actually sign NDAs and contracts if you so require. But rest assured that all of your data is only accessible to you. It is not accessible to anybody else apart from the Opfin team itself. And even that is only if you request support for any particular item.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Sam, again, thank you again for joining us today. Anuj, a huge shout out to you. Thank you for, again,
Sure.
building Opfin as well. I'm sure it is going to help a lot of businesses in India. Harshita, thank you for hosting the webinar for us. And everyone who's joined us today, have a lovely evening ahead and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Stay safe, everyone. And yeah, thank you for
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.